Hi, I'm Tom Scioli, author of Space Opera Xanadax Across the Unknown Dimensions of the Galaxy, a new creator-owned comic coming in August from Image Comics. I just uploaded all the files, getting ready to go off to the printer, so you'll be seeing it soon. I'm also the author of Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater, coming in July in a new trade paperback edition. And then I'm also the author of The Twilight Zone. I'm doing a new Twilight Zone comic for IDW. And I'll also be at Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina this weekend. And me and Matt are hopping in a plane and traveling next week to MacPow, a comic book convention in the UK, in Cheshire.
We'll see us there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all you UK fans. So yeah, Twilight Zone, just thought I'd talk about that a little bit. And if you have any questions about it, Matt.
It's an original episode?
It's an original episode that I came up with.
Holy shit.
Pitched them, I think, like 4 or 5 different, like, little, blurbs. Like this idea, 4 or 5 different ideas of what the episode could be. And out of the stories I pitched, they picked one that stood out to them that they really liked, and then we got the go ahead. So I've been, picking away at it. It's an interesting challenge. They announced the series in Entertainment Weekly, and they had they had a quote from me in it, and I was saying, like, it's one of those things I always wondered, like, oh, what would it be like to write a Twilight Zone story? And like, is that something I could even, like, am I even capable of doing that? Because Twilight Zone I hold in such a high esteem, and just always loved it, and just those kind of stories. It is kind of interesting to try to get in that headspace and try to create like a new Twilight Zone story.
When you're writing it, are you envisioning any like old school classic Twilight Zone actors that could like
that's funny. Yeah,
like a Burgess Meredith, or like a or like just old school, like
yeah, I have a guy in mind.
Ooh.
But I forget his name. It was a guy, he's in Psycho. He's like the used car dealer in Psycho. He's been in a couple Twilight Zone episodes, so I kind of picture him for one of the roles.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I hadn't really, I hadn't thought specifically about that, but as you mentioned it, it's like that guy's kind of rattling around up there. Mostly I'm thinking of like the vibe. I'm thinking of like the sound effects, the music, the costuming, that's what's kind of in my mind as I'm doing this stuff. And yeah, some of the cost, it's fun with the because I love that design, that like Twilight Zone design sense.
Normally it would be like on like a marathon.
Yeah, where I first started watching it was in Philadelphia. I think it was Channel 57. They had the Twilight Zone-a-thon, it was called.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was like a 24-hour marathon or whatever. And so I stayed up as late as I could. All my siblings, they were all asleep. I was still staying up I'm watching the one with the evil dummy. Everybody else is like passed out on the floor. I'm the only one left watching the evil dummy episode, and like, oh my God. And then eventually I fell asleep, and then I found out that my sisters later on, while I was sleeping, they woke up and they saw the Talkie Tina episode, and they were telling me about that, and that sounded terrifying. I was like, oh man, good thing I was asleep for that one.
There was the one, it's kind of emotional, where like I think it's got the Twilight Zone where like the guy wants to get into heaven, like, and he won't let him in because he's like, he won't let his dog in.
Okay.
And he's like, I'm not going anywhere without my dog.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Real Steel. It was like
I think that was based on like a science fiction story. I forget, like some famous science fiction story, but it's what they made like a full-length movie of it. Yeah, they did that like in the early 2000s. They started taking Twilight Zone episodes and making them into like full movies, but they weren't branded as that. It wasn't like Twilight Zone presents. It was just like, it would be like, there was one movie where it was about like a button you press, and when you press a button, somebody somewhere dies, like somebody you never met, and that was a Twilight Zone episode. That was actually.
They did a movie.
Yeah, there was a movie like that, but it was originally like an 80s Twilight Zone episode.
Oh, wow. Like, I remember some of the 80s Twilight Zones, too. That was the Twilight Zone, the movie.
Yeah.
The infamous.
You know what? I might have seen Twilight Zone, the movie, before I saw the actual show. I probably saw the 80s show second. I could probably look up like what year Channel 57 had the Twilight Zone-a-thon, because that was it. And then after the Twilight Zone-a-thon on Channel 57, Channel 12, the PBS station, started playing Twilight Zone, where I think maybe like at midnight or something,
Oh,
they'd play
cool.
like one or two episodes.
It would be like the New Year's marathon.
That became like a thing later. That was on like TBS or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the New Year's marathon started like maybe like 20 years ago.
Yeah. A lot of stuff I would get introduced to in marathon form.
Yeah.
Like, they don't kind of do that anymore. Like the James Bond marathon.
Right, streaming is like that's your marathon, is like you binge a series or something. Those New Year's ones were pretty comforting because like New Year's Day, there's not a ton going on, so it's like you just throw on the Twilight Zone.
It's like comfort food.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking about favorite episodes, I mean, like the really creepy ones were great. Like if there's like a talking puppet or so, like the Evil Dummy one's great. Talkie Tina is great. To Serve Man, that's so great.
Gosh.
And the first time you see To Serve Man, it's like pretty mind blowing. I definitely saw To Serve Man before the Simpsons episode,
yes.
the Treehouse of Horror episode.
The one where I can't remember where the guy's glasses. Time Enough at Last.
Time Enough at Last. I always enjoy that episode because Burgess Meredith is just like so delightful and great in it. But the sci-fi of it and stuff isn't like, there's other episodes that have like a cooler premise, but again, just as like a character thing and just like a tremendous performance and just so much fun, that is pretty great. But there's actually a better Burgess Meredith episode. There's a Burgess Meredith episode where it's kind of like 1984. It's like this this oppressive state that is going to, I think they're going to like put him to death or so. I forget what it is exactly, but that's actually the better Burgess Meredith episode. There's a couple more Mr. Bemis and stuff. There's a couple more Burgess Meredith episodes, but like I like that like 1984 one a little better than Time Enough at Last. And then the one where like she's getting plastic surgery.
Oh yeah,
then,
that one is iconic too.
Again, there's all those great ones.
There's one episode, I can't remember what it's called, where it was like
you're like, I'm trying not to spoil any of the episodes, so you kind of spoiled it. It's this old lady. It's the mother-in-law from Bewitched. That's one of my favorite episodes.
It's so good.
Might be my absolute favorite because I love the special effects of it. But yeah, there's like flying saucer lands. She lives in the middle of nowhere in a shack. This like flying saucer lands, and then she's getting attacked by these creepy little like aliens. They look almost like toys or something.
Yeah.
And they're shooting her with ray guns and stuff, and she's just like attacking them with like an axe.
It's
that one
so
is phenomenal.
awesome.
There's also one, like, I don't have the nostalgia for this episode that I have with some other episodes, but I love it so much because I saw it for the first time relatively recently. Like, I thought, okay, I've seen all the Twilight Zone episodes, or maybe I've at least seen all the great Twilight Zone episodes. So the only ones I haven't seen are like the shitty episodes or whatever. That's what I thought. And then I saw this one episode that like blew my mind. I loved it so much. It was a guy who has a wax museum of serial killers in his basement. So just like throughout his, Jack the Ripper and stuff, like serial killers throughout history. It is wonderful. It is a wonderful episode. It's like dark. It's funny. It's twisted. And I was like, how did I go my whole life with, like, I'm a Twilight Zone fan. I've seen a million episodes. How did I never see this one? And how is this not one of the episodes that they talk about in the same breath as To Serve Man and Talkie Tina and stuff? It was amazing. I mean, maybe because it's maybe a little less typical Twilight Zone. It doesn't quite fit the Twilight Zone formula exactly. Like, it feels almost more like a Alfred Hitchcock episode or something, but it's so good. Like, you got to drop everything and check out that episode.
I'm gonna go through to try to find that.
The script for the Planet of the Apes movie was written by Rod Serling, and people talk about that almost as like a lost Twilight Zone episode, because it kind of follows the Twilight Zone formula. And there are a lot of these Twilight Zone episodes where there's some kind of space mission and they land on the planet and something weird's going on and stuff. There's even a couple episodes that are almost like Planet of the Apes prototypes, like where Serling's doing some of the like twists and stuff that he ends up doing in the Planet of the Apes.
There was one, 5 people like in search of an exit or something.
That's another, that you're talking about all the iconic ones. And it's funny because a lot of those iconic ones I haven't watched in a while because I kind of watched them to death and like was so in love with them like the first time I saw them, and then I kind of burnt them out. So now I'm just looking for like oddball episodes that I haven't seen, not the iconic ones, but that one's so great. That was another one of my favorites. and that would be on PBS and on Channel 57 a lot. I love that one.
Well, since you're working on the Twilight Zone, would you want to borrow this to like?
Oh, this to check out, for research purposes. Yeah, that would be great. I don't know if you ever we might have talked about this before, but the TV show Felicity, they did a Twilight Zone episode.
No, you didn't tell me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did a Twilight Zone episode where it was filmed in black and white, horror anthology episode of the show. Really great. And they do a takeoff on
that's awesome.
The 5 characters in search of an exit, among other things. I think they won some kind of award for that episode too.
Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna I think Felicity's streaming somewhere.
They won like a Peabody or something. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of that show, and that episode was pretty great. I always liked when the show veered towards like my specific interests, like sci-fi and stuff, because it's like I'm not typically somebody who enjoys like a sort of soap opera.
J.J. Abrams?
Yeah, but it was J.J. Abrams. My wife would watch the show, and it was like, I'd just hear her watching it, and it would just sound like really interesting. And then eventually I'm like, I gotta watch this show. And it ended up becoming one of my favorites. But it was J.J. Abrams, and it's like, okay, yeah. And then when he did Alias, I was like, okay, this is much more like right dead center of like the kind of stuff I like. But yeah, he made this really excellent show in a genre that's not really my genre. But then he did Alias, which is like totally like a like a superhero kind of thing. Yeah, like a spy, basically like the Black Widow or something. J.J. Abrams had said that by the time they got into the later seasons of Felicity, he thought like, hey, what if Felicity gets chosen by like the CIA or something, and she becomes like this secret agent and like goes on these adventures, and like, oh yeah, that's ridiculous. So then he took that and made Alias. But it's like, I would have been, it's like, okay, this J.J. Abrams guy, I like the cut of his jib. Yeah, I feel like I knew Twilight Zone as a cultural reference before I'd seen it.
Yeah,
like the do like there was a lot of, we talked about like hacky comedians doing Star Trek.
Oh yeah,
doing like Shatner jokes when we were kids, but there was also like hacky comedians doing like Twilight Zone, or it would even be like Robin Williams being like,
oh yeah,
submitted for approval. Like he would sing the Twilight Zone theme in like half of his riffs. He'd sing
it would pop up in there.
Yeah, it's kind of like follow the Olympic Road. It's like the same kind of hacky.
That'd be another thing that pops up in movies. Anytime something weird happens, the character like spikes the camera, it zooms in and plays the Twilight Zone theme.
As a kid, I was scared of like horror movies and stuff like that, and the scarier Twilight Zone episodes were pretty scary. But mostly, I found it kind of charming and comforting and nostalgic and like old-fashioned and stuff. It just kind of had that glow about it. But then the '80s Twilight Zone TV series, I think the showrunner was like J. Michael Straczynski, who did Babylon 5. But I was terrified of those episodes.
So scary.
It was super scary, and like the opening was super scary. The opening credits were super scary. They'd have these like doll faces and weird faces. And then they'd show like the iconic window from the Twilight Zone. Mm-hmm. In the 80s version of the Twilight Zone, the window looked exactly like the window in my bedroom. So I'd get so like freaked out, like late at night you can't sleep, and then you're looking at it, it's like, it's the Twilight Zone window.
In the opening, you're in the reflection of the window.
Yeah. A couple of the 80s ones that really got under my skin. Again, it was during the Satanic Panic.
Oh my gosh.
And so there were like sort of satanic episodes that were super scary. But there was one where it was this kid and his grandma lived with the family, and she was kind of like, sick on her deathbed or whatever. And he like just didn't want to go in and see grandma. He was kind of scared of grandma. But like it turns out grandma was like, satanic or something. And she like tries to steal his soul. And there's like a scene where he's like standing in the hallway looking down the hall at grandma's room, and then his shadow like flies off his body towards grandma. And so that one was super freaky. Like, and then there was one, it was called the Uncle Devil Show, and it was like a Mr. Rogers kind of show, except it was Satan.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he like, and I guess maybe a little bit of Soupy Sales also, because how Soupy Sales, there was like the famous thing of him like telling kids to like take the green stuff out of their mom's purse or whatever. And then send it to him. Like there was kind of that, like he would be telling the kids like all kinds of like horrible stuff they could do, around the house. But yeah, that was that one freaked me. Any of the Satan stuff would like freak me out when I was a kid.
Hell yeah, we should do a full-on Satanic Panic episode.
I think we have. We could probably like edit a bunch of episodes together and do that. But There was also one that kind of that I liked this. Again, I watched it all the time. I was a big fan of that 80s Twilight Zone, but it would like get under my skin and creep me out. But one of them was like the Shadow Man. Just he looked like the Shadow, but he was like all silhouette. Like there was no flesh. He was just this big shadow with like a hat and maybe a cape or something, or a cloak.
So terrifying.
Like, he would say, "I am the Shadow Man. I will never harm the person under whose bed I live." So it was like this evil, like murderous boogeyman that lived under this kid's bed. But he knew that, like, even as the Shadow Man is like killing people, he knows he's safe because the Shadow Man lives under his bed. So that was pretty creepy. And yeah,
Alec Baldwin's the Shadow Man.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. So that one stuck with me. I'm trying to think if there were any other. And then there were like some cool, like sort of more like there were the horror episodes, and there's like the sci-fi episodes. We'll do some more Twilight Zone talk. Maybe like as the comic gets closer to release and stuff, we'll do some more Twilight Zone talk because. Yeah, I could talk for hours about Twilight Zone. So yeah, I'm Tom Scioli, author of space opera Xanadax Across the Unknown Dimensions of the Galaxy, coming in August from Image Comics. I'm also the author of Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater, coming in July in a beautiful trade paperback edition, and yes, the author of The Twilight Zone, issue 2 of the IDW series.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
Yeah, we'll see you in the Twilight Zone. In the Twilight Zone.